Dillian the Body Snatcher right here. It's a champ. Big up to Sporting Icon. Subscribe. Otherwise, I might pay you guys a visit.
So King Kong Luis Ortiz, he seems pretty confident that he's going to defeat Deontay Wilder on November the 23rd in Las Vegas and thus becoming a WBC heavyweight champion of the world. And of course, getting revenge. Of course, Deontay Wilder defeated him last time out. Now, is that confidence, is that justified? Is it just an outward confidence, but inside he's nervous about the fight because of what happened in the first one? Who knows, okay? But either way, this is the fight we're going to get, whether we're happy with this fight or whether we're not. Yes, it's a rematch in truth that nobody is really asking for, unless, of course, you're really team Luis Ortiz. Now, I've been a fan of Luis Ortiz for quite a few years, and I've always rated him very, very highly. Lately, he hasn't really been doing too much. Ever since he lost to Wilder, he hasn't really defeated anybody of any kind of great note. He really hasn't, and hasn't looked good either. But when he first took the fight with Deontay Wilder, way back when, I was happy that he was going to be fighting Wilder, okay? And yes, he could have fought Anthony Joshua at that time, because Anthony Joshua, of course, had the IBF, and then he won the WBA. So therefore, the IBF mandatory was called next, which was Pulev, then of course switched to Carlos Takam. And then Luis Ortiz would have been next, as he was the WBA mandatory. Now, of course, because of this, he chose to go fight Wilder instead, which I couldn't knock him for it, because at the end of the day, it's still a world title shot. And had he have defeated Wilder, he could have went back to the table with Anthony Joshua and got a bigger sum of money, okay? So had he have defeated Wilder, it really would have worked out. But unfortunately for him, he didn't put the high blood pressure medication on the VADA test forms and thus failed a VADA test. The WBA suspended him and stripped his mandatory position, which in my opinion they shouldn't have done when he was proved to have been just incompetent for not putting it on the list. Okay, because the WBC, they didn't suspend him. Now, either way, Luis Ortiz, listen, there's been quite a few people saying how he's an avoided fighter, he's the boogeyman of the division, what have you. Now, all that was started with Tyson Fury. He jokingly said that about Luis Ortiz, and people then use that to suit their own narratives ever since. But the truth is, when you look at Luis Ortiz, he hasn't really taken any real step-up fights, okay? And I will get into his statement in a second. Now, when you talk about step-up fights where people say that Luis Ortiz is avoided, the truth is he hasn't tried to make any big fights. He just hasn't tried it. When it came to Anthony Joshua, he could have fought Anthony Joshua right after Joshua defeated Carlos Takam, but Luis Ortiz decided not to and went after Deontay Wilder. Clearly, he thought that Wilder was the easier option, okay? But it kind of backfired. But prior to that, who's he really defeated? He did defeat Bryant Jennings. That was a good win at the time. Yes, Bryant Jennings, the fight beforehand, he did lose to Vladimir Klitschko. Then he fought Luis Ortiz and then got stopped by Luis Ortiz. But regardless, it was still a good win. But didn't do too much after that. I mean, he had a fight with Dave Allen. Dave Allen, who was 1 second away from going into the final round with Luis Ortiz. And Dave Allen was a novice at that point. Did Dave Allen only have like 10 fights or whatever it was at that point? And also, he fought Malik Scott and just couldn't cut the ring off. He just couldn't close him down. Malik Scott was fighting scared and all that kind of thing. Now, Luis Ortiz has been his own worst enemy, and I don't think his team has particularly helped him along the way. They haven't tried to make some of the big fights. And some offers that he has had, even recently, he could have fought Dillian White at the O2 Arena on headlining pay-per-view. But he turned that down because he wanted to fight on the Wilder Fury undercard. He could have fought Anthony Joshua on June the 1st at Madison Square Garden for $7 million. His team turned it down. Effectively, he turned it down. People could say, but it was his team. Ultimately, he's the head of his team, right? He's the boss. So it all ends with him. The buck stops with him, ultimately. Now, when it comes to this rematch, it's not a rematch that we're really looking forward to, of course, but they're going to put it on Fox Sport pay-per-view. Again, for me, I don't feel it's a pay-per-view fight, and the numbers could well be quite embarrassing, potentially at least anyway. But for me, Luis Ortiz, Deontay Wilder, pay-per-view should have been the first fight. That's what should have been pay-per-view. And there were controversial moments in that fight, of course. And around number 7, Luis Ortiz was all over Wilder like a rash after previously getting dropped in round number 5. And Luis Ortiz was dominating that fight up to that point anyway. But listen, the judges were seeing it totally different. But Luis Ortiz was all over Wilder, and the judges gave that round to Luis Ortiz 10-8, as if Wilder had got knocked down. Okay? And what happened is, after the minute's rest, the medical team then looked at Wilder. Now, in New York, which is where it was, there is a rule that the medical team can check on a fighter at the end of a round or after the minute interval if there is a cut. Wilder was not cut, so therefore they shouldn't have checked him. These are the rules, right? So, yes, there was controversy, but ultimately, Luis Ortiz had that fight won at the end of round number 7. He could have got Wilder out of there, but he went all amateur and threw it away and gassed himself out. Listen, he was still winning the rest of the fight up until he got dropped. But the thing is, with Luis Ortiz, him getting a rematch, he hasn't earned the rematch. And as I said, I've always been a fan of Luis Ortiz, but he hasn't earned the right to have a rematch with Deontay Wilder. When you look at plenty of other competitors out there, you look at Dillian Whyte, he is ahead of the queue when it comes to Luis Ortiz. Adam Kownacki also has a better resume than Luis Ortiz. So that's Dillian Whyte and Kownacki, just off the top of my head, that have better claim to fight in Deontay Wilder for the WBC heavyweight world title. And there are others as well. So Luis Ortiz, he's getting a gift, and there is rumours that he's going to be getting $7 million, which is the money that he turned down against Anthony Joshua. And I'm presuming because his team messed it up, or because Al Heyman and the PBC told him not to take that fight, which is pretty clear because I think Jay Jimenez, I believe that he actually admitted that as well, where he turned down the fight with Joshua because he was guaranteed a fight with Wilder. As a consequence for that, because he turned down $7 million, he wants $7 million at least for a compensation fight because of the opportunity that he lost. And if the rumours are true that he is getting that, then fair play. But how much is Wilder getting? I mean, Wilder must be getting about, 28 million then, right? If not a bit more. And again, if he is, big up. Fox Sport are going to lose a hell of a lot of money on this rematch. Now, Luis Ortiz, he seems pretty confident, and he's been paying Deontay Wilder some form of respect. Okay, Wilder and Ortiz, these guys have respect, only not just because of the in-ring abilities of each other, but a lot of it is because of their children and that as well. Okay, both their children had or have some disabling issues. Okay, so these guys can connect on that level for sure. Now, Luis Ortiz has said this about Deontay Wilder. I have to give Deontay Wilder a lot of credit for taking this fight. It shows he has the heart of a true champion. He is not at all scared to take a dangerous fight. Let's be honest, this is the most dangerous fight for him. In my opinion, he's the best heavyweight in the world until someone beats him. That's exactly what I'm going to do on November the 23rd at the MGM Grand Garden Arena on Fox Sports PBC pay-per-view. King Kong is coming to Las Vegas. So that is Luis Ortiz's statement. Now, of course he's going to say Wilder is the best heavyweight. Why? Because Wilder had a victory over him. So that's the first one. Second of all, he's going to fight him again. Okay. What he's not going to do is go fight Wilder and then say, you know what, I think that Tyson Fury is number 1. Because then, if he was to defeat Wilder, then he can't say how I'm the number 1 in the division because he's already said Tyson Fury is. If he loses, oh well, I lost to the number 1. That's why he's doing it. Again, that's why Deontay Wilder said that about Luis Ortiz. He's the second best heavyweight around. Well, no, he's not. It just happens to be the best heavyweight that you fought at that particular moment. Because it did take Wilder 40 fights just to have one step-up fight. We know Deontay Wilder, he then took on Tyson Fury, and Tyson Fury done him. Okay, and they had to screw Tyson Fury in points, which is why a lot of us say that Wilder is a paper champion. But the reality is he is actually the champion. So to say that Wilder is the best heavyweight, listen, I have no idea if he truly means it at all. No idea. But for him to give Deontay Wilder credit for taking the fight, credit for what? There's already an agreement. The PBC had already told Wilder that's who you're fighting next. Luis Ortiz, you're fighting Wilder next. They've already told him, which is why Wilder turned down that $100 million offer from DAZN to fight Anthony Joshua, because he was already told he's going to be fighting Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz turned down Joshua also because he's already been told he's going to be fighting Deontay Wilder. Again, these are not just opinions. There's paper trails, there's receipts for all this, okay? Now, to say that Deontay Wilder has the heart of a true champion, I mean, what are you talking about? Again, we've just mentioned that Luis Ortiz, he turned down Anthony Joshua and he turned down Dillian Whyte. Deontay Wilder also turned down both of those guys. With Anthony Joshua, he turned down multiple contract offers. Didn't even try to negotiate even 100 million. He may have got a little bit more, but he didn't even try to negotiate. With Dillian Whyte, he even sent him a personal DM. Again, go over to the DAZN YouTube channel and you can find it, where he sent Dillian Whyte a personal DM saying, "I want to freeze you out for 2 years. I don't have to fight you." Even though verbally, when there's a camera, Wilder's saying to everybody, well, if Dillian Whyte goes and fights Luis Ortiz, and if he beats Luis Ortiz, you've got my word. Dillian Whyte said, okay, fine, I'll fight Luis Ortiz, and I'll even put an extra stipulation in it as well. I'll knock out Luis Ortiz, but then you fight me next. Nobody else, you fight me next. Wilder refused to do it. He refused to sign. So what Wilder says publicly isn't what is really happening. Again, this is a fact. It's not just an opinion. So Wilder doesn't have the heart of a true champion. If he did, then he would have fought some stiff competition long before now, and wouldn't have turned down life-changing money. Because at the time with Dillian Whyte, that was life-changing money for him. It really was. And with Anthony Joshua, 100 million, come on now. So for him to say that he's not scared to take a dangerous fight, but how dangerous is Luis Ortiz? How dangerous is he really? Is he really that good? He's looked terrible over his last couple of fights. He's really starting to look his age. Really starting to look his age. And there's very few people outside of long-term Luis Ortiz real fans would really say that Luis Ortiz is going to win this rematch. There'll be a lot of people hoping that he does. And again, in my opinion, the only way that this fight can be justified, because right now it's not justified. It really isn't. But the only way people can say it's justified after the fight is if, first of all, the fight turns out to be really competitive and a really good fight, much like the first one. Or Luis Ortiz defeats Wilder. That's the only way. If Wilder goes in there and blasts out Luis Ortiz in the first couple of rounds, then people will go, see, again, this is why Wilder, okay? You keep on taking these fights that you shouldn't be taking. You need to be taking stiffer opposition out there. Adam Kaunaki, you should be fighting him. You should be fighting Dillian Whyte, certainly Dillian Whyte. So it's not really a fight that anybody's really asking for. Luis Ortiz, he's never been a world champion. He doesn't have a great resume. He really doesn't. He's not an avoided fighter. Even Shannon Briggs tried to fight Ortiz. Okay, well, in fact, Shannon Briggs tried to fight Deontay Wilder as well, and Wilder turned the fight down. So this is essentially the battle of the Anthony Joshua and Dillian Whyte duckers. I know the extreme Wilder fans don't like hearing it, but again, that's a fact. They ducked him. It doesn't matter how you look at it. There's no point you sitting there saying how Luis Ortiz would defeat Joshua. Wilder would defeat Joshua when both you guys turned it down. So you can't say that. Anyway, listen. So either way, he seems pretty confident that he's going to defeat Deontay Wilder on November the 23rd in Las Vegas. If he does, great. I mean, good on him. But I think a lot of us realise that this is probably his last payday now. And he's just going to get done. He's going to get absolutely annihilated in this fight. Anyway, it is what it is. Drop your thoughts below. Click thumbs up, subscribe. Catch you all on the next video.